So here we can see two axes. One, the larger axe is a Dane axe, and the smaller axe is just a typical combat axe. And I've had both these axes for many years. The larger one needs polishing and de-rusting a bit more to make it look nice and not look like it's been attacked by an angle grinder. And this axe is one I've had for many years and is a very good and heavy duty combat axe. Now both of these axes are blunt, but I thought I'll show you the difference between a good sized Dane axe and a good sized fighting axe, because they are different in style and shape, and I actually absolutely love these axes. Now, the bigger axe was put on a shaft, and during some filming the shaft broke because I chose, by choice and accident, a rubbish piece of wood. I wanted it to break on camera, and it did that effectively, and it didn't take too long to make a handle for it. But this handle on this axe has been there for 20 years at least. This is a very nice axe. This was made by a guy called Tony, and it's probably been made from a much larger felling axe, as a lot of these axes are converts from modern axes. Whereas this one here, the larger of the two, has probably been laser cut out on a laser machine with the whole profile, and then this bit here has been shaped and then welded here, which is why when you look at it you can see a more of a brown dark stain, because that there is the welding and the different quality metal. In fact, you can even see a little bit of bubbling on it from the weld itself. So often these axes were made this way, and you don't really see it too much on this side, because this side is probably the bit that was laser cut out, so it's got the full profile rolled over and then welded together. And it's a bit of a modern cheating way of making axes, but it does work fundamentally so, and you end up with a nice axe. Now, I've had this axe for many years, and it's one of my favourite axes I've got. I used to fight with this axe quite a lot, until one day the shaft broke when it was attacked by a sword and just took too many sword blows. Those sort of things happen when it comes to combat. Now, this axe used to belong to an old friend of mine called Mad Lee. Mad Lee was a fantastic warrior and Viking. And these days he's got a very, very bushy beard, and is a really nice, decent, ground-to-earth chap. Not seen for many years, hope he's okay. Well, at least I think it used to belong to Lee. We called him Mad because he was a bit of a crazy Viking, and many Vikings are. Which of these two axes do you prefer? Which do you like? Which one would you take into battle? Or would you choose to take both? Would you have a sidearm of a fighting axe and maybe go in with a Dane axe? Because Dane axe handles are traditionally much longer, around about 0.9 to 1.2 metres in length, depending how tall you are. And of course, if you're 6'7", then you may even have one which is 1.3, 1.4 metres high, which is even longer, and I find that to be quite incredible. Again, if you look at this axe, and my finger's pointing from the top because I'm filming it one way round, you can see that this has been de-rusted with an angle grinder, because this axe got very, very rusty at one point in its life, because I completely forgot about it and left it down my workshop. But gradually it will be polished when I have a good decent polishing wheel, and I'll grind all those marks out and make it shiny, and it will look really, really nice. And one of the problems when you got too much kit, you got too many axes, is you're constantly cleaning and de-rusting them and making sure that they don't rust. Now again, if we look at the shaft a little bit, the shaft has also been made, most probably in this style, by an angle grinder. This is probably a bit of ash, maybe an axe handle from a modern axe, and it has been ground down, and it has got a bit of wear and tear. You can certainly see the top of the axe wood handle, which is protruding, which is often the right way of doing it. It's slightly, well, you could do with tidying up and maybe even replacing at some point. And I love this style when it kicks out or kicks in and kicks back in again and out to a bit of a flat end, because you could use that fundamentally as a hammer, for instance. And it's often the side of the axe that we often forget about fighting with, but of course the fighting end is always this end. Now, there you are. You're in battle and you're fighting some Saxons. Would you throw your axe at the enemy? Because we often talk about throwing axes like Francisca's, but in my mind it never makes sense to throw your axe away, because when you throw it away, it's gone. You can't fundamentally go out and say, hello, old Cedric, do you mind if I have my axe back? So throwing your axe away in battle is a very foolish thing to do, because you need that axe. It's not just a weapon, it's a tool. It's your shelter, it's your survival, it's your kindling for your fire, chopping logs, hunting down animals. It's doing multiple jobs other than hunting. Whereas a Dane axe is always a combat and fighting weapon. You can't really do a great deal apart from chopping logs with a Dane axe. I suppose if you're really desperate to, you could probably make a shelter with a Dane axe. But this is why you have a secondary axe and always have an axe along with your sword, because it makes so much perfect sense. So axes, fantastic, a wonderful weapon of the Dark Ages. Of course, they go so far back in history because, you know, we have the Bronze Age and bronze axes. Then the Iron Age came along and axes developed into iron. And then the iron became better. And then we get to the stage in the 8th to 11th centuries when we are seeing axes like this. And I think these sort of axes are just utterly brilliant. And you can't own enough Dane axes. I think I must have about 5 Dane axes. I do have a war axe somewhere in the house, but no matter what I do to look for it, I can't find it, but I know it's there somewhere. So, yes, can you own too many axes? The simple question is no, because you get so many different size and sort of axe heads. You could even get left and right-handed axes because the handle would be specifically made for a left or right-handed person. It's not something you'll see every day because most axes are for right-handed people because that's the dominant hand in the world today and probably was back in the day. Although saying that, were people more left and right-handed back in those days? Well, possibly so, because you use your hands for both work and for fighting. So you may be ambidextrous in that aspect. So axes are such an amazing tool and weapon to have. And I just love them to bits. I think they're just amazing pieces of equipment. I think, yes, both of these need a polish. I just love this classical shape of an axe. Like it goes in, comes out and goes in again, and then you get this little bit of a knobby bit at the back. I think that's just brilliant. And as I said, both these axes, pardon my hands, but I can't really turn it without my hands, both need a little bit of working out. You get little dark spots where the rust has developed, slightly bitten in, but these are really tough and sturdy axes. They can go rusty and they'll still clean up. You could probably bury it in the ground for 10 years and dig it up and it will still be usable. And I've literally found axes like that in the past when, you know, I think one time I was looking through an old fire pit and in the bottom of it I found an old axe. And unbelievable, it's probably been there for many years, but it sharpened up and it got put on a handle and it was a really good tool. So axes, amazing, amazing things. We always underestimate them. And it does make you think, what was the average amount of axes in a longhouse? Was it 1? Was it 2 or 3? Well, in my mind, I think it would be between 2 and 3 would be the average amount of axes if you could afford the metal, because metal again was very scarce. Not everybody had the chance to own more than one axe. But if your axe broke, it got dull, it got too old, you had to go and buy another one. That cost a few coin, but it was a good investment because there are so many jobs you can do with an axe. So I hope you found this video to be valuable and educational, and we will see you in the next video. Now don't forget folks, subscribe and leave a comment below.